Humanity matters.
Hello, and thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Gilad Avrahami. I'm the Programs and Development Coordinator here at hmTv. This podcast is a production of the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center of Nassau County. On today's episode of The Past Has an Afterlife here on hmTv, my special guest, Ahmed Jama, will join me for a conversation about the quest for Somaliland's recognition internationally, the way that it rebuilt from the genocide experienced by the people of Somaliland in the 1980s, and the connection to Israel and to the Jewish people that's been hidden for such a long time. Ahmed, thank you for being back with us. So you talked a little bit about the genocide and the attempt by the Mogadishu government to exterminate the Isaaq people who lived in the north. And in around 1991, by that point, there was an army of sorts, right? The SNM, and they were able to secure independence, and not only that, but to rebuild, and to rebuild in a way that established security and safety for the people who lived there. Can you tell us about that? Somaliland didn't collapse. It rebuilt. How?
Thank you so much, first of all, for having me again in here. And what I think in here, we need to highlight, SNM, they took over the nation, especially in Somaliland, and they were an armed force, and they tried to communicate with the local people, especially the elders of the clans that are living in Somaliland. And the reconstruction and the rebuild is really an organic process where the public took the ownership of the government. The public became who are owning the government, and this reconstruction was almost entirely self-financed. There have not been any outside support or financial support from international community or by the Somali diaspora. And the local business was really the guardians of this reconstruction process. And because Somaliland lacked international recognition, and because the state have been newly formed in that period in 1991, it was denied access to any kind of international support. So the people, between 1991 and 1993, there have been inter-clan conferences, like the one that happened in Burma, lasted for months. That conference, it lasted for months. And all the clans that are living in Somaliland, they joined that conference. All those months, they were really discussing what kind of government and state that we need to build and how we can share the power among the clans that are living and inhabiting in Somaliland. And at the same time, they were really trying to ensure to discuss and debate until a consensus that everyone and every clan that are taking part on the conference should become satisfied and should become persuaded. And this bottom-up reconciliation, it allowed, especially the Isaac clan, to forgive other clans that used it to support the government. And they said that the kind of brutality, genocide, and massacre that our people used it or faced it during the central government, it was just a systematic and government-based genocide. But we don't have any hostility toward the clans that are living here with us in Somaliland. And that is how they agreed to build and regain their independence that they lost in 1960. So this is the reason and the foundation that that was uh, that was the idea of Somaliland or the idea of statehood in Somaliland have emerged, and they said that uh, we agreed now to forgive and we agreed now to form a state. Now we need to move on to the practical session where the government will take part, and
Right.
that it was how the Somaliland state and how the Somaliland government have been formed.
So they had this terrible, terrible period of repression under the Siad Barre regime. They returned to this peoplehood that they had for such a long time. They gathered around, they fought against the genocide. They managed to secure that area where people had been living. They reestablished the institutions that had sustained them for such a long time. They returned to those values of tolerance and coexistence. And in the meantime, the southern part of Somalia has been continuing to go through periods of war, and there have been several different transitional governments that haven't been able to keep their control over their territory. There are a lot of different militia groups. And that's contrasted with the North, where they've established a democratic society, peaceful. There's an economy. There's a return to their tradition of commerce and trade as well, in the port cities in the Red Sea. So the only thing they're missing is international recognition. So how exactly did the international community respond to Somaliland, the experiences that they had, and their quest to maintain their independence that they had regained after such a long time of seeking it?
Uh, for for the past 35 years, or for the past 30 years, the response has been one of diplomatic marginalization and adherence to a legal fiction that says Somaliland is part of Somalia and they should resolve the issues among them. And at the same time, the international system has essentially trapped Somaliland with the borders of a collapsed state. We know that the central government of Somalia collapsed in 1991. But still, the international community was really pressuring Somaliland to be trapped and confined in that collapsed state, creating what I call informational black holes, which I mean that every information or every story that you need to hear from Somaliland have been blotted by another story from Somalia. We say that you don't have, even if you go today to the internet, you cannot find any specific report that is specifically talking about Somaliland until you mention about the collapse of the central government in Somalia. This is how they really merged a two separate things, and that is really became a challenge and for Somaliland to tell its own story. And at the same time, but at the same time, if we just look back on the history, we can find these kind of response was really having some cracks, was really having some breaks. And in 2005, the African Union sent a fact-finding mission team into Somaliland, and they concluded that Somaliland's case is unique and self-justifying and should be heard. Despite this, despite all the efforts that they put on that report, many peacemakers still mistakenly believe that they must establish a government in the south, and Somaliland should be part of that government. And that policy is effectively banishing the stable and the secured situation here in Somaliland. So I really think it will really become it will really create a challenge to Somaliland to govern and rebuild and continue rebuilding its government. So the international response to Somaliland's case is not just, it's not based on fact, and it is based only for what I call informational black holes, which they only rely on the informations that they are receiving from the southern part in Somalia. And you already know that in the recent discussion, but we once Israel recognized Somaliland, the representative of Somalia said that there is no genocide took place. When we know the United Nations report clearly and loudly reporting that genocide took place in Somaliland, and there have been more than 50,000 people that have been killed and massacred here in Hargeisa, in Burro, in El Gabo, and every site here in Somaliland. So the international response to Somaliland's case is really it's not based on justice, and it is based on a single information that comes from the south.
Right. And very strong attachment to the idea that Somaliland and Somalia should all be part of the same country, despite the fact that during the only times that those have happened, the North has been subject to repression, and that they have a much stronger history in the North of their own country. And they are, even though they've established their own country in every single way, other than having recognition from the former controllers and from other parts of the world, not a single country on earth recognizes Somaliland. And that has a lot of effects, I assume, on the economic capabilities in Somaliland. But Israel recognized it in December 2025. So can you tell us about why it makes sense to you for Somaliland and Israel to have this partnership? Because they seem like very different places. But what connects their story, and what has their relationship been like over the years?
The connection started before even what history documents today. It is a long millennial long relationship between Israelis and Somaliland people. But I think the thing that we need to highlight in here is that both nations, both Somaliland and Israel, they are isolated nations. Israel, geopolitically, is isolated in the Middle East. There is so many countries that are opposing the existence of Israel in the Middle East. While Somaliland is diplomatically and geopolitically and in terms of state, it's really marginalized and avoided by Somalia and many countries that are befriended with Somalia. So surrounded by this two similar environment, I really believe the kind of engagement between the Israel and Somaliland is based on a similar story, how to tell together our story of rebuilding, of reconstructing, and of shaping the legal teams of the international system. And at the same time, both have to build resilience through isolation. Even though they are isolated, they are really still resilient to the international system, and they establishing their legitimacy through empirical effectiveness rather than mere legal formality. So there's also a strategic convergence between the two nations. Both seek to rewire the regional order. Somalia needs to gain recognition from the international status, and Israel needs to guide and protect its strategic and economic maritime that are really very essential for its state, for its economy, for its government, and for its people. And Both seek to rewire the regional order to counter rival influences and protect critical maritime neighborhoods. We know that Israel is what I call an a sea island. It is located in all the sites that Israel is located. There is an it is it is very close to the sea, and that makes Israel an island that's really uh, finds all its support from the maritime access that Israel is finding from there. And Somaliland, at the other end, Somaliland is really located in a very strategic location. That 17% percentage of the global economy or the global trade passes here in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. So they are really having that commonality in terms of strategic and in terms of historical engagement. We know that there is some document that still today exists, that there have been some social connection between the two nations. And we know that there is some historical document says about the Star of David in Dubato. So I really think the relationship between the two nations is really very foundational, and it extends only on a mere political agenda, but it is a historical, economical, social, and at the same time, it a story of future to build the two nations and to be out of the chains that have been put on them, to be out of the isolation and the discrimination they used to face for the past for the law for the past years. So I really think this is a story that the two nations are really sharing.
Tell us a bit more about the history of the Jewish people living in Somaliland. You said there were stars of David, I think, found on gravestones in Somaliland. So, what does that mean? How long have they lived there? Where have they lived? And maybe tell us about the connection to the idea of coexistence as well in Somaliland.
I think this story is really hidden, but it is also very proper in history. For centuries, Somaliland was a trade interface where Jewish mobility was they used it to freely move in Somaliland, and they have been recognized. They were a recognized part of the regional economy. We have evidence of ancient cemeteries in the Bata village near Hargeisa, where headstones are embossed with the Star of David. And furthermore, there is a local clan we call Yibir. And there is some scholars and some historians claiming that this is a twisted name of pronunciation of Hebrew. And they are really having a long-standing tradition of being descendant from the Hebrew. And they say that while there are no Muslims, they used historically, they used it to be marginalized, and they use it to live peacefully with the local people. And some of the historians claim that these clans, they are really sharing affinity, or they are descending from the Israel. And that is because they have been uniquely engaging with the local people. So uh, from historical perspective, we can really see how much the two nations are interconnected. And Somaliland people, they use it to live to live peacefully and welcome any foreigner that are coming to their land, or on making some trade or business in their land. And this is due, or this is because they are located in a very strategic maritime where many people, many foreigners, many outsiders will come and will trade. And the Jewish people, they were part of these communities, and they were really living peacefully and coexisting with the people peacefully, and contributing to society. And whenever we want to find some historical document, we can find it. But the awareness and the consciousness of the local people is not really on that level. And still, Somaliland is really struggles to find international support about the archaeological and historical documentation of what happened in the past. But I really believe that the connection, the historical connection between the Israeli and the Jewish people and the Somaliland people is really very profound, and it's really, really interconnected and amazing. So I
Yes,
believe uh,
mhm.
this is really creates the kind of tolerance and the kind of open-mindedness that the Somaliland people are really having to engage with the outside world, and the Israel is part of that story.
This connection is so powerful on a lot of different levels, as you said. So it's very historical, very long tradition, very connected to the values that are shared. And I think one thing that's important to highlight is how important having institutions like the ones that exist in Somaliland and Israel are when they're surrounded by forces or mindsets that are very opposed to coexistence, that don't envision the ability for people unlike the ruling power to exist in those areas, and to fight against hate, and very deep hate, ethnic hate, religious hate, that exists all across the Middle East and East Africa, and that Somaliland is playing a very important role just by being there in combating. And you, as you said, the international community's response to Somaliland's existence and its resilience today is not really reflective of the values that are sometimes elevated, such as prioritizing human rights, prosperity, coexistence, tolerance. Somaliland stands for all of those things, and yet it's the part that isn't recognized. So do you think that Israel's recognition might signal a shift in how sovereignty is understood globally, that it is not entirely a question of what the borders are and the sometimes arbitrary version of territorial integrity, whether the borders and the state is the same as it was 20 years ago, but rather something earned, something demonstrated in the institutions of a country? Do you think that with Israel and Somaliland's partnership, we can move towards that? And do you think that that's necessary in order for other countries to follow suit and to recognize Somaliland as well?
I really think both entities demonstrate that internal order is not contingent on external recognition. Both have built democratic institutions and high-functioning societies while facing normative anxiety and rejection from much of the international community. And what I really believe is the both nations, even though they are isolated, even though they are facing all these challenges, they are partnering because they are having a common goal. They can engage to build a better future for their generation and for their next generation. And at the same time, they are partnering to reshape the international system, which is really or legally making them out of the topic. And in order to set up that legitimization, they need to engage together and face the challenge on the international system collectively. And at the same time, I really believe that this kind of engagement between Somaliland and Somalia, and between Somaliland and Israel, it's an engagement that will create an opportunity for my generation for the next generation. It will allow many of Somaliland people to receive international opportunity to indicate in Israel and even to find some economical engagement from the outside world. And at the same time, from the Israeli side, I believe it is an opportunity to widen its relationship with the Muslim world. We know that there is so many hostilities, there is so many narratives that are arising and saying that the Muslims, they are who, they are against the Israeli people. But this is becoming an opportunity to lower that tension because the Somaliland people, they are Muslim, and everyone was really following in the media how the celebration became here in Somaliland when Israel officially recognized Somaliland. So this is also becomes an opportunity to engage with the Muslim world and to extend its relationship with the Muslim world. And at the same time, I really believe that this is also a very strategic and geopolitical relationship, which says that Somaliland is located in a very strategic location. Israel can come and can really trade off on this strategic location. And Somaliland is also having it's rich on minerals, and there is some historical studies that says Somaliland is having a wide or an extensive part of Somaliland areas is really having some reserve on petrol and energy. So can be an opportunity to create an economic engagement between the two nations. And on international and on legally perspective, I really see this is an opportunity to reshape the politics of recognition in the international system, and at the same time, an opportunity to free the Chinese that are really challenging them and making them isolated in international law. So I really believe that the engagement and the partnership between the two nations is really, really, really very important, and it's really an opportunity to shape a good future, a better future, a prosperous future for their nations and even for the world. And I already documented that in my research paper.
Thank you. And I've read your research paper, and it has so many, as you're discussing here, so many levels to the relationship between Somaliland and Israel, and so many reasons why the world needs to wake up and care and pay attention to this incredible story and its connection to the values that, in order to, as you say, make a better, more prosperous world, are very, very needed now. So thank you for making this wonderful presentation, and thank you to everyone for tuning into this episode of The Past Has an Afterlife on hmTv. I would like to thank my guest, Ahmed Jama, for sharing about this hidden but deep relationship. We will return for part 3 to discuss your personal connection to all of these stories that we have said today. If you enjoyed exploring, thank you so much then. If you enjoyed exploring the information, history, and stories in today's conversations, be sure to check out our other podcasts here on hmTv. Please subscribe, share, and stay connected for more engaging conversations. Until next time, take care and be well.